What's going on? Welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. We are long overdue for an episode. It has been crazy around here for all three of us fellas. Last time we were with you, we had a live episode. No, it wasn't a live episode. We did a Week 16 preview, and the recap was in person. But then, Tyler, you and I was traveling around. I was on the road for like 5 straight days before Christmas. I then was on the road for another 5 days, 2 days after Christmas. Tyler, you've been displaced for 5 days now, 5-6 days. And Cameron's on a flight back home today. So we have been all over the place. This was not how we anticipated the ending of our fantasy football season to go in terms of the podcast, but we are here with you now. Lucas and Tyler. I'm at Lucas Wenzel, at Tyler_Plath. FF Fellas, the FF Fellas on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas on TikTok and YouTube, where you should be subbed and have your notifications turned on when we put out all sorts of new fantasy football content for you. Happy New Year as well. Happy New Year.
Have you seen that TikTok sound? Like the 2022 season has now officially closed, and now there's a 2023 one, and I'm like, I'm already sick of 2023. That sound is so overused. I'm over it already.
We're 2 days in. You're already sick of the new year?
Already.
We have 350, is today this year a leap year? 354 days at least of potential opportunities. You're ready to toss 2023 out on 2 days?
Well, because my lifestyle is so based on TikTok. Yes, I am. I'm kidding.
Yes,
Okay.
Tyler's life is so consumeristic that he's already done. He's already done. Look, we got a lot of exciting things coming up in 2023. I'll leave it at that. Stay posted for exciting announcements coming out soon. I know we've been saying this. I feel like we've been teasing this for so long. I'm like waiting for the official stamp of approval. Yeah, we'll thanks for being with the fellas. Thanks for hanging out with us, because we're gonna have a lot of exciting stuff coming up for you in 2023 and all throughout the offseason as well. We've reached the end of the fantasy football season for about probably 90% of leagues, if not more. Week 17 is championship week. We'll see on Wednesday's episode how I'm really feeling. Thursday's episode, how I'm really feeling about championship week, because I could be jumping for joy or I could be absolutely peeved. To be updated on Thursday. How many leagues are you in championship in, Ty?
1, 2, 2.
I'm with you. I'm in 2. But our Dynasty League, that's the one. We'll have updates on Thursday. And Cameron will be on that episode, and he will have lots to say. I know he will.
Oh my word. That, yeah, let's just not touch that today.
We won't touch it today.
Get there later.
We will touch that on Thursday's episode. Let's cover some news and notes from around the league, though, before we jump into the booms and busts of championship week. The NFL released the full Week 18 schedule literally just an hour before you and I started recording here, Ty, at 4:15 Central Time. We won't go through the whole slate, but just a few games of importance, some games to note. There was a lot of talk about who was going to be playing at what time, what was on the line for some of these teams. Tennessee and Jacksonville, they did get flexed to the Saturday night game. So the Chiefs Raiders play earlier in the day. The Titans and Jaguars play at 8:15 p.m. Eastern time, that is, on Saturday the 7th. That's for the division. On Sunday night, 8:20 p.m. EST, Detroit is at Green Bay. So they got the primetime slot. And you want to know what's sad? Detroit might not be playing for anything.
Right.
If Seattle wins, they're not playing for anything.
Yeah, because it comes down to just Green Bay. Then if Green Bay wins, they're in.
They're in, right? So I think that's mostly why they put Green Bay in that game, because we all know what's going to happen now, right? We all know the Packers are going to win that game. If there's no way they don't. The NFL wants Rodgers in the playoffs.
They want Rodgers and Brady in the playoffs, and guess
Brady
what?
clinched.
Yeah, Brady clinched. Now one of two, and now we need to get the other one in the end. And Mr. Goodell himself will be very, very happy.
Yeah, well, and let's be real. Like Green Bay, I don't care if they're favored in that game. If they're somehow underdogs, I highly doubt they would be. Yeah, Green Bay, just take money line Green Bay. I have no doubts in my mind whatsoever they win that game, and that's coming from a Minnesota Vikings fan. Go ahead.
That's a yes. As a Minnesota Vikings fan, like Green Bay is really, really good. So that's why I'm rooting for Detroit this weekend. Detroit and Seattle, because golly, I don't want to deal with the Packers in the playoffs. And that's not to say that Minnesota will play them in the playoffs.
I would much rather run into Seattle than either of those two.
Seattle, give me the Giants. Give me. I don't even want Detroit in the playoffs, right? But I'd rather have them than Green Bay. That's just how Viking fans are at how we are at this moment.
You brought up the Giants. They play the Eagles 4:25 on Sunday, and that's important because the Cardinals play the 49ers at that same time. If Philly loses to the Giants and San Francisco wins, San Francisco is the number 1 seed overall in the NFC. Did I say that right? Did I say if Philly loses and San Francisco wins? Yes, that's correct.
What about Dallas has some part to play in this too, don't they?
No, I don't believe. Well, yeah. If Dallas wins, and Philly, if Dallas wins, Philly loses, and San Francisco loses, Dallas becomes the 1 seed.
Right, and they get Washington.
Right. So, but San Francisco, if San Francisco wins and Philly loses, they're the 1 seed. Dallas doesn't play any part in that.
I mean, you look at the body of work throughout the entire season, I think there's an argument to be made that San Francisco deserves the 1 seed more than Philadelphia, but you know what? Philly is a completely different team with Jalen Hurts is in.
But Philly wins, they're the 1 seed. That's the only other thing you need to know there.
Just don't be surprised when it's an Eagles 49ers NFC Championship game. That's all.
That's somehow how it's going to end up being. Speaking of Philadelphia, Jalen Hurts, he is expected to play in Week 18. That was confirmed earlier today. And speaking of the Cardinals, James Conner, he suffered a shin injury. Excuse me, goodness, and shin injury. That was not good grammar. Suffered a shin injury in the third quarter. He did not return in that game. Keep monitoring his status throughout the week if you have a Week 18 championship. Denver, here we go. We're going to get into some NFL news now. Denver, they're reportedly looking for a head coach with head coaching experience. Ooh, who would have guessed? I never would have guessed a team looking for a head coach would look for someone with head coaching experience. And that is a big reason why it seems like it was reported earlier in the week, last week, that Dan Campbell was the front runner. Dan Campbell? No, not Dan Campbell. Quinn, thank you. I'm like, I said that and I put the face to the name and it did not compute. Dan Quinn, thank you. He is the front runner. That was reported early last week, which would make a lot of sense. Sean Payton, he qualifies here as well, but the Saints may want more than a first-round pick for him because like he's still on tenure with the New Orleans Saints. So the Saints would have to trade something. They would have to acquire something in return. Teams would have to give up something for Sean Payton. It's not just a willy-nilly we can sign Sean Payton. The Saints will get something in return for Sean Payton.
You know what's so funny to me about that though?
What?
Give me one player on the Saints that has an equal price tag to Sean Payton at this point, because I mean
Alvin
Kamara, but it's a running back, so it's a
Chris
first
Olave.
Olave just because he's young. But
Olave might be the only one, because I you were going with that Kamara argument, then I cut you off with Olave. But now that you say that, I do kind of agree.
Like I think that's funny, is that a team could potentially pay more draft capital for a head coach than a player on their roster. And Olave, Marshawn Lattimore, maybe even.
Yeah, maybe.
There's a handful of other players like Ryan Ramczyk probably too. But again, the point being, there are only a handful of players that could go for reportedly the same price tag as Sean Payton. I find that hilarious.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about. And the Saints actually want more than a first for Sean Payton. So that wraps out all the news and notes from around the league. We will be back with more news prevalent for week 18 later this week. But let's recap week 17, championship week. The players who either won you a championship or cost you a championship. And some of these players, man, it is brutal once we get to the bus. But the booms were nice this week. Let's start with the running back position. No surprise, Austin Eckler, the RB1 on the week, 10 attempts, 122 yards. He had 4 rushes of 20-plus yards in this game. He scored twice. He caught 4 receptions on 4 targets for 39 yards, 32.1 fantasy points. Austin Eckler, after a struggle to the beginning of the season, has absolutely run away with the overall running back one finish this year. Is he the fantasy MVP this year?
He's got to be. I mean,
I think he has to be.
I think maybe, to make it more specific, he's probably obviously he's going to be the running back MVP, and that's what I was going to say. Just because there were so many misfires in the first round when it came to running backs this year.
Yes.
Austin Eckler proved that, yes, a running back should still be considered with high draft capital in your fantasy drafts.
I mean, and the RB2 on the week, exact same thing. He was one of the few non-misfires, despite what people were preaching this offseason. And again, this guy also proves, like, first-round running backs do have immense value. Christian McCaffrey, 19 for 121, 2 scores, caught 6 passes on 9 targets for 72 yards. Saved a little bit there boosted a little bit, 40-yard reception as well. He finished with 31.3 fantasy points. His snap share and workload in this game was ridiculous. But this is what you expect out of CMC.
He is, what do you have? He had 19 carries, 6 receptions, 25 touches.
And 28 opportunities.
Yeah. This is the McCaffrey that you drafted for. You probably didn't draft him for the trade, but this is one of those McCaffrey performances.
Yes.
That makes you just immensely proud of yourself that you took him in the first round of your draft.
Yeah, that you didn't chicken out on him. And let's be real, he probably elevated you quite a bit here down the stretch. If you were in the contention for the playoffs, CMC, he has been phenomenal over the second half of the season since being traded to San Francisco. The running back 3 on the week, DeAndre Swift, 11 for 78, 2 scores, 4 receptions, caught another touchdown. 27.7 fantasy points. Where has this been all year? It's just been back and forth. He has a great game, then an okay game, and a bad game. Those were DeAndre Swift's last 3 weeks. Now here he is, RB3 finish on the week. He was on fire to start the season. Missed a bunch of time again. We'll do a whole 2023 recap next week. Or 2022 recap. Look at me jumping years already. 2022 recap. But This is just like a knife to the heart at this point, honestly.
Honestly, I mean, this is what we were hoping. Yeah, we were hoping for this. Not averaging 27 a game, but these kind of 11, 12, 13 carry games, rushing touchdown here or there, 4, 5, 6 reception games, touchdown here or there. Like, this is what we were hoping for, and glad to see it now than never. But
too little, too late for DeAndre Swift.
Just this one stings.
This one stings a lot. That stings a lot. As someone who was all in on DeAndre Swift, as someone who went to buy in on DeAndre Swift to be a league winner, he pulled through for me in the third place game, but could not boost me to a championship. Raheem Mostert, running back 4 on the week, 9 carries, 29 yards. Did not find the end zone on the ground, but he caught 8 passes for 62 yards and a score, 23.1 fantasy points. Travis Etienne, I don't even want to chat about that Miami backfield. It's just a mess because Jeff Wilson still led that team in carries. But if you play in week 18, that backfield's a headache to figure out. I don't want to play games with it.
No, not at all. And Jeff Wilson had 7 receiving targets on his own.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's not like Raheem Mostert ran away with the targets in this game either. So it's you could still say it's Jeff Wilson's backfield, but Mostert was just more efficient with his opportunities in this game.
He was indeed. Travis Etienne, if you want to talk about efficiency. 9 attempts, 108 rushing yards. That's 12 yards a tote. 5 rushes of 20-plus yards for Travis Etienne. He scored, caught 3 passes for 32 yards, finished with 23 fantasy points. Do not fear that JaMychal Hasty actually out-touched Travis Etienne this week. Don't fear that, okay? This game got out of hand extremely early. And if you're playing for the division championship this week, why would you put Travis Etienne, who struggled with a foot injury midway through the season, why would you give him more work than he needs, especially when he showed you he's still got plenty of juice? Don't fear about that. Travis Etienne, against Tennessee next week, I'm not super stoked for that matchup, but he has been on fire as of recent.
He has turned it around ever since we came out and said that you cannot play the guy anymore. He put up 12 against Dallas, which was pretty much a shock to most people, but I shouldn't even say it was the 12 fantasy points. It was the fact that he went over 100 yards against Dallas.
Yep.
Then he backed it up with 14 against the Jets because he ran for 83 yards.
Heavy rain game.
Work in a rain game. And then this one, obviously, it was Houston, but still. We said you couldn't play him after putting up less than a point against Baltimore, 7 points against Detroit, 3 against Tennessee. We said you can't play him. And he's turned it around quite nicely.
He has. Week 18, I think if you play in week 18, I think you have to play him.
You have to.
I think you have to. But if you're somehow made the championship with Travis Etienne, he rewarded you greatly. Jamal Williams, double DeAndre Swift's rushing attempts, 22 for 144. 1 touchdown on the day, only caught 1 pass for 13 yards, but 22.7 fantasy points. 4 rushes of 20-plus yards. This is the quintessential Jamal Williams that you have seen all season. And that, we believed from the get-go, even with Jamal Williams chipping into Swift's work, like these are 2 guys that can coexist and be top 15 running backs. And it took until week 18 or 17, to finally see that. But let's be real. You probably didn't play Jamal Williams in week 17 after his recent performances. Jerick McKinnon. Gosh, his stat lines just bother me every time I look at them and we have to read his name. They bother me so much. 2 rushing attempts. 4 yards. Oh, and one of his rushes was all 4 yards. He caught 5 targets, 5 of 6 targets, though, 52 yards, 2 touchdowns, 22.6 fantasy points. You had to keep playing Jerick McKinnon. You kind of didn't have a choice but to keep starting him. It was very Clyde Edwards-Helaire like, But the only thing was that Jerick McKinnon was getting 5+ targets every single game. CEH was not getting that. But I don't know how you're supposed to play a guy who only receives 2 rushing attempts pretty much in every game. He really didn't see much more than 4, 5, 6 every game. I don't know how you're supposed to play a guy like that when Isaiah Pacheco was supposed to be the dominating player here against some terribly poor run defenses.
Doesn't this feel like James White maybe
Yes.
like 4 or 5 years ago? You know what I mean?
Yes, because but that's the thing. It's James White then, but James White was never this like top 10 weekly finisher. He was like top 15, which you're like, great, I can play that guy every week. He was never like RB1, where was McKinnon last week? I believe he was RB19 last week, but then
19.
RB7 this week. Like James White was never that. He'd be like RB12, RB13, RB15, but never like this.
It's just a headache. You said it. You have to keep playing him. You have to keep him in your lineup if you're still going. But if you had Jerick McKinnon in your lineups in your playoffs, he rewarded you nicely and hopefully brought you home a victory because it's been in fuego.
Cordero Patterson, he got back on track, 9 attempts, 42 yards. Finally, he saw some receiving work again. 6 catches on 8 targets for 42 yards, 20.4 fantasy points. I'll say this. Tyler Algier has clearly taken over that backfield, though. Tyler Algier is the lead running back there. Cordero Patterson just reaped the benefits this week, especially since he finally saw receiving work, which we hadn't seen in ages. Najee Harris, 22 for 111. 5 yards a tote. Caught a touchdown. 2 receptions. 12 yards and a score there. 20.3 fantasy points. Again, just too little too late for Najee Harris.
It's a bummer.
He burned you bad this year until the final weeks when it really didn't matter because you probably didn't make the fantasy playoffs. Right. And then Josh Jacobs, 17 for 69. Nice. 1 touchdown. 4 receptions on 5 targets, 26 yards, 19.5 fantasy points. I mean, it's nice for Josh Jacobs, but again, after his past couple of weeks, just a little too late, unless if you did make it to the championship with him. He rewarded you there. Not his biggest booms from this season, but still top 10 finish on the week. You will take that if you're Josh Jacobs' manager. Wide receiver booms. Let's move on there and keep things rolling. How do I even start this? Like how do I intro Mike Evans? Like, where have you been? Why now? Anybody who was managing you probably didn't make it out of the first round. Can we be honest about that? Mike Evans has been bad for multiple weeks now. And if you have Mike Evans on your team, he probably sunk you.
If you made it far,
can I call out Cameron?
Yes.
Because Cameron benched him. He benched him for another guy on this top 10 list. But the other guy on this top 10 list, I mean, he put up half the points as Mike Evans. Not that it mattered. Cameron still obliterated his opponent. But, like, Cameron sat Mike. Like, that's the point you were at with Mike Evans. And then he drops 48 points. 48 of them. 10 receptions. 207 yards. 3 tutties. Where was this Mike Evans?
Even on a much grander scale too. Where was this Tampa Bay offense all year long?
Yeah, I mean, in Godwin, we'll get to Godwin. He also had a nice day. Brady threw for 430. What? I don't get it. I don't get it. Like, good for Mike Evans. But man, once again, this is going to be the theme of today's episode. Too little, too late. Too little, too late from a lot of these studs. Because you needed this a lot sooner. Devontae Adams. Sorry, buddy. Like, you needed this last week. You didn't need 7 for 153 and 2 scores from Jared Stidham this week. 34 fantasy points. Like, if I'm a manager of either of those two, I think I only had 1 share of Mike Evans and 0 shares of Devontae Adams this year. But if I was managing those two, I would be absolutely furious after this week. Because those two cost you a trip to the championship. They did, flat out. Mike Evans has been so bad. Devontae Adams, just brutal last week. And then they come back and both put up 30 plus.
Makes you want to just like take something and just throw it against the wall, because exactly like you said, they cost you your championship.
They did. No, they did. They did. Your championship hopes were sunk because of those two. Brandon Ayuk, he didn't play as pivotal of a role in your championship, I assume, but 9 of 12 for 101 in a score, 26.7 fantasy points there. Look, he was great. Wide receiver 3 finish on the week. He was really good. If you played him this week, you were rewarded. Without Debo, you kind of hoped this would happen. 12 targets especially. And this was a back and forth game. So the fact that Brandon Ayuk not broke out, but put up this kind of a performance, you got to feel good about that. I really want to know how many people played him in the championship, though.
It's a good question, because I mean, lately, or I guess before this past week, he was kind of low end flex territory. I mean,
right. He hadn't gotten any better with Brock Purdy. I mean, not that Brock Purdy was supposed to make him great, but
I mean, in the previous 5 weeks before this week, he had 1 finish inside the top 30. Everything else was outside of the top 30. Yeah. That kind of low end flex territory. And hopefully you played him, but I don't think anyone expected the kind of game that he had.
No. And I think the game script kept things in favor for Brandon Ayuk. Here's a stat line I hate. Amari Cooper, 3 receptions on only 4 targets. Oh, but it doesn't matter because 2 of them were touchdowns. And he went for 105 yards, under it to putting up 25.5 fantasy points. Again, what were you supposed to do with Amari Cooper this week? He's been going back and forth with Deshaun Watson at quarterback, from being piss poor to having a great game to being piss poor. Good for Amari Cooper. My guess is that if you had him, you probably played him this week, and you were rewarded.
Which was strange, too, because it was against Washington on the road.
And they had buckled up against wide receivers, and Amari Cooper on the road has been bad.
But for whatever reason, it was this week that he turned it around.
Speaking of boom bust as of recent, DJ Moore, actually, he's been incredible with Sam Darnold. Who am I kidding? 6 receptions on 10 targets, 117 yards and a score, 23.7 fantasy points. That wasn't with Sam Darnold. Oh, no, it was with Sam Darnold. Excuse me. Yeah. Yep. Ignore that. Ignore that I just said that. DJ Moore has been great with Sam Darnold. I didn't have the guts to play him this week.
No, he has been pretty matchup dependent this year. I mean,
but Sam Darnold recently, he's been on fire. He's gone 16 plus in 3 of the last 4, if I'm not mistaken, including this week.
I mean, the last 3 weeks, he had Pittsburgh, Detroit, and Tampa.
Okay.
He averaged 20, 21 points a game. I'm not even going to look at the stats before the bye week, just because that was...
It was pretty Sam Darnold, too.
Yeah. So, I feel like DJ Moore was a very popular sell candidate this year.
He was.
And if you were the person that got him, I sure hope he rewarded you because you played him. Because
I hope you played him. That's the part that has to be said. I hope you played him because, like I said, I've not had the guts to do it, and I've been burned every single week because I didn't. I should have done it this week. I didn't. I played Mike Williams over him, who didn't have a bad week. But I should have been playing DJ Moore the last 3 weeks, and I just haven't been. CeeDee Lamb, 11 of 14 for 100 yards, 2 scores, 21 fantasy points.
0 scores.
0 scores, excuse me. 0 scores. Misplaced my numbers here. 21 fantasy points. Against the Titans, you expected it. Big day for CeeDee Lamb. Chris Godwin, 9 of 9, 120. 21 fantasy points there as well. Again, this Tampa offense was on fire against Carolina Panthers. Richie James. Hello. I guarantee you didn't play him this week. 7 receptions on 7 targets, 76 yards and a score. 20.6 fantasy points. Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown wrap up the top 10. 13 targets for Devonta Smith in a game that which they were trailing. And in a game where Minshew absolutely stunk. 9 for 115, 20.5 fantasy points. A.J. Brown wraps out the top 10. 4 for 97, on 9 targets. Found the end zone, thankfully. 19.7 fantasy points there. How many people do you think played Devonta Smith this week? Because he has been so wishy-washy. He's been tearing it up since the bye week.
So in the last 5 games, he's had 3 top 12 finishes.
Right.
Each game, I'll just say it like this. He had 21, 17, 17, 31, and 20.
Those are his last 5.
Those are his last 5 games.
So you probably played Devonta Smith this week.
I think the best way to say it is this. If you didn't play Devonta Smith this week, you hurt yourself. You played yourself.
Yeah. It seems like Devonta Smith has had this like sneaky, quietly good season. But tell me he's not Tyler Lockett.
Well, he is Tyler Lockett because I'm not going to say because, but he's a wide receiver 9 on the season. The wide receiver 9.
But can we look at his beginning of the year stats though, where he just went back and forth and back and forth. I'm pulling his numbers
right
up
here for you.
Yeah, I need to see it with my own eyes because seriously. Week 1, we all remember the week 1 goose egg. 15 against Minnesota, 30 against Washington in week 3. Then 4 against Jacksonville. He went 18, 15 in weeks 5 and 6. Then goes 7, 4, 13, 13, 9, and then he goes on this 5-game stretch of 21, 17, 17, 31, 20. That that screams like Tyler Lockett. And again, Devonta Smith, wide receiver 9 on the season. But the up and down nature of it is what Tyler Lockett has been knocked for his entire fantasy career. And now Devonta Smith has done the exact same, but just finished out the season stronger. And Tyler Lockett has always been a top 15 option every year. Yet we're people are probably praising Devonta Smith for this. Tyler Lockett was bashed for it. So if Devonta Smith goes as a top 20 wide receiver next year, I'm going to be furious. Because Tyler Lockett was never praised in that way. Tyler Lockett was always he shouldn't be drafted top 20. Well, don't tell me Devonta Smith should be next year then.
Right. I think it falls into that Mike Williams category a little bit too of this past year of just no one wanted to take him inside the top 10. Some people weren't even willing to go get him in the top 15. But it was his, boom performances that kept him in there, and that was the appeal. That's Devonta Smith. But for whatever reason, to your point, Tyler Lockett never got that kind of recognition, you would say.
Let's keep things moving here. Quarterback booms. We got a lot to cover here in the last 20 minutes or so of the episode. Tom Brady, Quarterback one on the week. We talked about how on fire this Tampa Bay offense was. 30 of 45, 432 and 3. Added a rushing touchdown as well. 37.7 fantasy points. Tom turned back the clock. Again, sticking with the theme of this episode. Too little, too late, man. Far too late. I've seen him on waiver wires in leagues. Come on, man. Too little. I love you. Father Tom. Father Brady. I love you. I love you, Dad. But come on. I needed this a little bit sooner from you, man.
He has had 3, 4. So including this week, only 4 top 10 finishes on the year.
Abysmal.
It's not been good. And again, a little too late here, Tom. Little too late here. And while it was good to see a 45-year-old Tom Brady do this,
we needed a 45-year-old Tom Brady to do it all season, not in the fantasy championship when very few people probably played him.
Exactly.
Daniel Jones, 19 of 24 for 177 and 2, 11 rushing attempts for 91 yards, another 2 scores. This Giants team was on fire this week, 36.2 fantasy points. Daniel Jones, sneaky league winner this year. Like
quarterback
sneaky,
8 on the year.
Sneaky league winner. Like if you were out on quarterback, if you didn't have a Kyler, a Jalen Hurts, a Lamar, and you've been playing Daniel Jones the past few weeks, like Daniel Jones has probably carried you to a chip. He is like probably the most underappreciated league winner this year, and he won't get any recognition for it. So I'm going to say it right now. Daniel Jones, sneaky league winner, like needs more appreciation for what he's done. Jared Stidham, everybody's number 1 streaming option this week, was 23 of 34 for 365 and 3. Added 7 carries for 34 yards, 28 fantasy points. Good for Jared Stidham, man. Made Derek Carr look like a chump. Derek Carr, a New York Jet.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was going to say, pretty much signed, sealed, and delivered Derek Carr's eviction notice from the Las Vegas Raiders.
Well, and the Raiders are a team too, where like they just clean things up on the defensive end. You can survive with a guy like Jared Stidham at quarterback for a year. You can bring in another guy for competition. You can bring in a Jimmy G. You can bring in a Jameis Winston. You can bring in any of those guys to compete and see if Jared Stidham can beat him out, and then just rebuild that defense in the draft. But like good for Jared Stidham, man. Showed out against the 49ers. Good for him. Patrick Mahomes, he sucks. Quarterback 4 on the week.
Yeah, not a top 3 quarterback. No, he stinks.
What a bum. 29 of 42 for 328 and 3. 26.5 fantasy points on the week. I'm surprised how competitive. I mean, I guess these Chiefs Broncos games haven't been really all that competitive. The final scores tell that the story to be a little bit different than how the game actually went. But I mean, Russell Wilson, 26-38, the quarterback 5 on the week for 222, threw a touchdown, rushed for 2, 24.6 fantasy points. Like, I don't know. Those Broncos Chiefs games are like sneaky competitive. I don't know what it brings out of Russell Wilson that he needs to perform well all of a sudden, but let's see, how many picks did he throw? Oh, he did only throw 1 pick. I thought he had 2.
He had a fumble as well.
That's what it was. Thank you. Yep. So I mean, still not great, but for fantasy purposes, both were top 5 quarterbacks on the week. Sam Darnold, yeah, he balled out against Brady this week. 23 for 37, or 23 of 37, excuse me. 341 and 3. He did fumble twice. Sam Darnold fumbled twice, yet he still finished with 22.6 fantasy points.
He's been the top 10 quarterback the past 2 weeks.
Jared Goff, 21 to 29 for 255 and 3, 22.4 fantasy points. Deshaun Watson, this angers me. Amari Cooper, a quarterbacks this week, 9 of 18. He threw the ball 18 times. He only completed 9 of his passes. 33% of his passes went for touchdowns. What? 169 yards. Nice. But come on, man. 21.9 fantasy points on that garbage stat line. Quarterback 8 on the week.
Come on, man.
That infuriates me. Brock Purdy, 22 of 35, 284 and 2. 18.1 fantasy points. And Justin Fields, just as bad as Deshaun Watson.
If not, just a little bit worse.
721 for 75 yards. Congratulations, Chicago. This is your future. You really want to deem this guy a top 15 quarterback in the NFL? I don't. I don't even want to deem him top 20. You can't have this kind of a performance be taken seriously as a top 20 quarterback in the NFL. I don't care who you are. I don't care how valuable he is with his legs. I don't care that he had 10 rushes for 132 yards this week and a score. I don't care. That's pretty for the fantasy stat sheet. In the NFL, I'm sorry, you need to have some sort of arm talent, some sort of accuracy to get the respect you deserve. It's why Lamar isn't touted as a top 5 quarterback. I should say this. It's not why more people are touting Lamar Jackson as a top 5 quarterback. I think he's borderline top 5, and we're not going to go through this argument right now. But like, you can't tell me this guy is legitimately your franchise quarterback if he can't complete more than 50% of his passes. If he can't throw for at least 100 yards. In a game in which they were getting smoked. Like, smoked is an understatement.
And I say by Detroit because Detroit's been playing better, but their secondary issues and passing defense are still kind of an issue. They
have a defense that can be taken advantage of.
Yes. And I know that Fields does not have as many weapons at his disposal as someone like Brock Purdy. But you gotta make something happen. And what this stat line, what that game proved was you gotta give him some extra pieces. And that shouldn't be what a top tier elite quarterback in the NFL should need.
No, and they were getting smoked. The final score was 41-10. Detroit smoked them. And Justin Fields only threw the ball 21 times, and they were down the entire game. You want to know what that tells me? Not even the Chicago Bears trust Justin Fields to throw the football. Mm-hmm. There is no reason Justin Fields should not have had at least 30 passing attempts in that game, at least 25 passing attempts in that game. You want to call this guy a top 15 quarterback in the NFL? You can miss me with all of that. I want nothing to do with that. It makes me sick that people think that. CJ Stroud's the next Justin Fields. We'll move on. I'm just kidding. That was. I don't actually mean that.
Oh boy!
If we want to talk Ohio State quarterbacks, I'll give you the track record here, and I'll show you how none of them have been franchise changers. Tight end booms of the week. We got to keep it moving. We're really going to have any time for bust. Dalton Schultz, 7 of 10, 56 yards, 2 scores, 24.6 fantasy points. You played him, and he rewarded you if you were in the championship this week. Trey McBride finally had his breakout game. 7 for 78 and a score, 20.8 fantasy points. Mark Andrews, it's about freaking time.
Hallelujah.
It is about freaking time. 9 for 100. 19 fantasy points.
A little too late.
Too little, too late. Sticking with the theme of today's episode. Too little, too late. Brock Wright. 3 receptions, 4 targets, 13 yards. I hate the Lions tight ends so much because they find the end zone. They get these top 10 finishes, but you can't chase them because you get lines like that. 3 of 13. As I said, he scored twice. 16.3 fantasy points. Darren Waller. Man, he's bounced back since returning. 3 of 5, 72. Caught a score as well. 16.2 fantasy points. Kobe Parkinson. 5 of 7 and a score. 14.2 fantasy points. Tyler Conklin, Taysom Hill. F you, man. 14 rushing attempts. and a score. Come on, man. This was supposed to be the Alvin Kamara game. This was supposed to be an Alvin Kamara masterclass. And Taysom Hill got all the work. It makes me sick. And Albert Quigman on without Greg Dulcich. Like, I've been waiting for Greg to have these 13.5 fantasy point games over the last few weeks, and now Albert Quigman gets them all when Dulcich is gone. That also makes me sick because I'm a big Greg Dulcich guy. Everything about that list makes me sick. Oh, I forgot Bob Tunyon as well, 3 for 52 and a score. Tight end 7. Sorry, you were going to say something on Taysom Hill, and then I just kind of kept going.
This tight end list just makes my head hurt, and it's
it made my head hurt all year.
So that was going to be my point. Was like, this is the perfect like image of the tight end position this year. Probably missing Travis Kelce, but
yeah, we'll talk about him. That dude stinks.
I mean, if you have Brock Wright, you have Kobe Parkinson, you have Taysom Hill, you have Albert O in your top 10 tight ends on the.
You didn't play none of them this week. Maybe you played Taysom Hill, but you must have been really desperate if you played Taysom Hill this week.
Right. And I think all the Travis Kelce 101 truthers out there that are very small but growing by the day are kind of clamoring like, yes, this is exactly why you take Travis Kelce earlier than the second or third round.
Right. 100%. Travis Kelce should be a top 5 pick next year. We'll talk about that more in the 2022 recap. I almost did it again. We'll do that. We'll talk about Travis Kelce in the 2022 recap. Let's move on to bust with the last few minutes we have here. These dudes flat out lost you your championship. Maybe more so the running backs and wide receivers than the quarterbacks and tight ends. But Saquon Barkley, in a game that the Giants were absolutely throttling their opponents. 7.4 fantasy points. The running back 40. 12 attempts for 58 yards. He was fine on the ground, over 4.5 yards per carry. 2 passes caught for -5 yards. And he didn't find in the end zone. Saquon Barkley crushed me this week. I mean, thankfully, I'm still projected to win in the championship with Saquon Barkley, but he absolutely crushed me this week. I needed a lot more out of Saquon Barkley than what he gave me. And again, the Giants were absolutely dominating this football game.
Yeah, and this is all he could put up.
He got outscored by Matt Breida this week.
Ugh.
His backup.
Oh, man.
Ramondre Stevenson fell off a cliff. 7.1 fantasy points. The running back 41 on the week. 8 attempts, 42 yards. Only 4 targets, 2 receptions, 9 yards. It ain't been pretty for Ramondre the last 2 weeks. He, touted as a league winner going into the playoffs, has become a league loser over the last 2 weeks.
That New England offense is just a mess.
Puzzling is the perfect word. Dalvin Cook, 6.4 fantasy points, running back 45. I mean, again, the Vikings were just getting absolutely handed to them by the Packers in this game. 9 attempts, 27 yards, 2 receptions for 17 yards. Again, this is like an Eagles Dalvin Cook thing, right? Where Dalvin only put up 9 against the Eagles, and everyone's like, it's like, well, yeah, because the Vikings were getting throttled by the Eagles in that game. Dalvin Cook wasn't going to see his normal workload. Honorable mentions: David Montgomery, 5.6 fantasy points, running back 50. Miles Sanders, also sneaky. Well, no, Miles Sanders popped off last week. I can't call him a sneaky league loser. No, how did Miles Sanders do last week? He was on the bust list last week too, I believe.
Yeah, because Sirianni came out after the game last week and was like, we got to get him more touches. And then at one point, Kenny Gainwell was getting more touches than Miles Sanders.
Yeah, here it is. Last 3 weeks in the playoffs, league loser Miles Sanders, 1.9, 6.1, 6.1. League loser Miles Sanders. Got you to the playoffs, and he lost it all for you. Leonard Fournette, 8.7, 31, or 8.7, 31 fantasy points. He did not have 31 fantasy points. He was the running back 31 on the week in a game in which you thought he would thrive in against Carolina. Tom Brady was looking Mike Evans' way. Alvin Kamara, as we talked about, 9.1 fantasy points and running back 27. Yeah, you weren't pleased if you're Alvin Kamara. I was not pleased with Alvin Kamara. I've been extremely dissatisfied with Alvin Kamara all year long. He did me no favors this week. Wide receiver bust of the week. If you had Justin Jefferson, like moment of silence for you, because he absolutely buried you this week. So moment of silence for all you Justin Jefferson managers out there. Two and a half fantasy points. The wide receiver, 85. 1 reception for 15 yards on 5 targets. This man was going to win you a fantasy championship this year. He was going to. He was on pace to do it. Unfortunately, if you didn't see this coming, okay, you shouldn't have seen 15 yards coming. But if you didn't see the Packers absolutely just giving it to the Vikings, like, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. Because in Lambeau, 325 game, Packers playoff hopes on the line. You know, Kamish wants Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs. This game was coming. Maybe not this piss poor. But still, despite being down the whole game, you think Justin Jefferson would have put up a better game than only 1 reception for 15 yards when you're down by freaking 30 points the entire game.
For all you Packer fans listening to this, hear me say this once and only once. Jair Alexander is good, but he is not great.
He ain't that guy. He's not.
Skip and Shannon were correct. They were right. You cannot say I'm a great corner when you have safety help either down or behind you, or I'm not going to get into this. This is going to make me too mad. Skip and Shannon were right. All those people that said that Jair Alexander is just a good cornerback, not a great, were right. And this game proved it.
Can we also acknowledge when he grittied on JJ afterwards, that play was pass interference?
It was pass interference.
Oh, it was clear as day. Like, I could have and I understand then they're like, oh, well, Justin Jefferson took his helmet off and nearly clubbed the ref out. I'm like, no, because Jair was all over him.
He was, yeah, I mean,
had the jersey from the back. Went down when he was going down he didn't have his eyes on the ball when he went down to defend the pass when Justin Jefferson was going down, had his right arm entirely. Basically tackled Justin Jefferson to the ground, even though JJ was going low. It just makes me laugh.
I mean, you know, as a cornerback, as a defensive back, you should be trying to do whatever you can to kind of get into the head of your wide receiver of your opponent. But that gritty is like up there whenever you see a cornerback do like the incomplete like celebration when the quarterback like overthrew the ball. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It's one of those like, dog, like really?
you got away with a pass interference there.
Yeah. Again, we've spent too much time on Jair Alexander.
Oh, we have.
He's a good corner. He's not great.
Good corner. He's a good corner, not a great corner. I 100% agree. DK Metcalf. And we'll just throw Tyler Lockett in there too. 1.3 fantasy points. The wide receiver 100 this week. 5 targets, 1 reception, 3 yards. Tyler Lockett, 2 of 2 for 15. I mean, the Seahawks just looked bad this week. Did not look great.
I mean, Kenneth Walker was
okay, yeah, we could talk whatever. Yeah, we could. The Seahawks wide receivers were not great this week. I will rephrase that statement. Because Kobe Parkinson was also in the top 10 tight ends.
Yeah, that's true.
Honorable mentions here, Christian Watson. Yikes. He was injured all week, though. I was surprised he even played this week. 2.1 fantasy points, the wide receiver, 88. Christian Kirk, the wide receiver, 64 on the week. Garrett Wilson, wide receiver 60. Terry McLaurin, the wide receiver 49, and Jalen Waddle 8.2, the wide receiver 37. Also did not do you any favors this week if you're in the championship with any of those guys. Quarterback bus. Trevor Lawrence. He just didn't need to do anything this game. He just didn't. This was a blowout. 17-21 for 152, 0 tutties. Did throw a pick, but again, like it's a bummer because Trevor Lawrence was golden all season, and then it gets to the championship, and the Jaguars are just absolutely blowing them out. Yeah, it's a bummer, but I'm guessing most people who had Lawrence probably weren't playing him unless if he was their insurance option, and they somehow limped to the championship without a Kyler, Lamar, Jalen, etc. Kirk Cousins. We talked about how bad this Vikings game was. 18-31 for 205 and a touchdown. 3 picks on the day. That'll kill your value.
And a fumble too.
And a fumble. Yes, I forgot to include that fumble in there. Honorable mention here, Dak Prescott, 16.4 fantasy points, quarterback 14 on the week. I just think it could have been better. It's the only reason why I threw him in here. Like, I feel like this should have been a top 12, top 10 week for Dak Prescott, especially since he's been top 10 almost every week since returning from injury, if I'm not mistaken.
He's got a couple 15, 17, 18
Oh, yes, you're
inches,
right.
but
You're right.
There are a lot of there's a 4, a 7, a 10, an 8, a 1 finish in there. So,
and against the Titans, I feel like this should have been just a better game for him in general.
For Dallas as a whole, really.
Yes.
I mean,
yeah.
There should have been really no reason why the Cowboys shouldn't have just thrown all over the Titans. I mean, Zeke literally had 19 carries for 37 yards.
Yeah, they just kept feeding him the football
which like
the Titans run defense is the best part of their defense.
Right. Well, and like I get that you still have to run the ball to keep a defense honest, but like that number, that 19 number should have been probably closer to like 12 or 13.
Correct. Tight end bust of the week. Travis Kelce.
Oof.
How do you catch 7 passes for only 43 yards if you're Travis Kelce? That's 6 yards of reception. What?
What happened?
And he, correct me if I'm wrong. Well, I mean, he's still been top 10 pretty much all season, but like he just hasn't been the clear and away number 1 guy as of recent.
No, he's over the last 5 weeks, he's finished tight end 14, tight end 9, tight end 4, which is against Houston, tight end 6, and then tight end 15.
It just hasn't. He's been consistent, but he hasn't been consistently great like he was all of this year, where you're seeing tight end 1, tight end 2, tight end 3 numbers every single week, pretty much.
I mean, the guy was averaging upwards of 18 fantasy points a game,
right?
Outside of these last 5 weeks. But within these last 5 weeks, he's got 3 out of these 5 games with 11 or less fantasy points.
Yeah, he has been, in perspective, he has been disappointing as of recent.
Mm-hmm.
Evan Ingram has been great. It's pretty bad this week. Tight end 39 with 3.9 fantasy points, only 2 targets. Honorable mentions here. Pat Freiermuth is a tight end 30, 6.6 fantasy points. He's kind of fallen off since he had his few big games down the stretch here. David Njoku, 3.1, the tight end 43 on the week. Again, with Deshaun Watson and Njoku, he's had his game here and there, but this Browns offense in general has just not been clicking on all cylinders with Deshaun Watson.
They need to get to the offseason quick.
Yeah, they can't get to the offseason more quickly. Anything you want to add as we wrap up booms and busts of the week?
I'm going to just kind of flash something here.
For those of you who are listening to the audio podcast, Tyler flashed the corner of a whiteboard that is pretty heavily covered in marker. And not like just like blacked out, like lots and lots of writing on there. I'll let you add any context that you want to add there.
We are getting closer and closer to draft season. We will be discussing dynasty football or
Yes,
dynasty fantasy football. Excuse me. this offseason, getting to know these rookies, these quarterbacks, the running backs, the wide receivers. There's a couple tight ends you could say, but that's starting now. We've got mock drafts coming out soon. I'm pretty sure I've got my full. I'm thinking somehow getting my full first mock draft 1.0.
Yep.
Thinking sometime next week.
Okay, I like it.
I'll be kind of teasing it a little bit on the TikTok this week. So tune in there if you want to check out that. But going forward, we're getting into some very good and interesting content.
At Tyler Plath on Twitter, if you want to view his full mock draft 1.0, as he said, we'll be teasing that over on the TikTok. We'll do the top 12 to 20 picks on there. We'll decide how deep we want to get into those videos this week. But Fantasy Football Fellas on TikTok, and that'll be up on Instagram Reels as well. The FF Fellas there. Fantasy Football Fellas on Shorts as well on YouTube. Make sure you're subbed. You'll get notifications when those come out. And we'll, you know what? Because we're nice, we'll post it on Twitter for you all too. FFL is over there. Make sure you're following us on all the socials. I'm at Lucas Wenzel on Twitter. I won't be dropping as much NFL draft content, but I will certainly be dropping Dynasty content over on my Twitter, along with some random fun little takes that I like to throw out there and watch the world burn with. Steak and Shake. I was in Indy this past week. Dude, Steak and Shake is goated. I don't like most underrated fast food restaurant out there. Everyone praises Culver's. Everyone praises In-N-Out. Everyone praises Don's. Everyone praises Five Guys. Steak and Shake don't get no respect, man. Steak and Shake, the most underrated fast food restaurant out there. And I said what I said.
Me and my family were going to stop at a Steak and Shake on our way back, literally on Sunday, and we called ahead to see like if we could either order ahead or if they were even open.
Yep.
This was like 12:30, and they're like, we're having some staffing issues, so we won't open until 1. And we're like, you're joking.
So that is the one downside of Steak and Shake. Staffing is a major downside. But that's about the only knock I can give them, if I'm being perfectly honest.
I looked at their menu. Their menu looks very, very good. I just wish I was able to partake in said food.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. We have so much exciting news and content coming for you this off season. We can't wait to share it with you all. So please hang around with us this off season. We're going to talk Dynasty. We're going to recap the 2023. I did it again. Helmet. That's like it'd be like my fourth helmet of this episode. If I had a helmet in my possession that I could put on. We'll be recapping the entire 2022 season next week. So hang around for that. We're going to give you all the tips and tricks to remember for next season, and recapping what went right or what went wrong for a lot of players this season as well. So again, Three Stooges being dudes, just Tyler and I hanging out here. But we will get Cameron back on Wednesday. We will see you all later this week. Deuces.